The following podcast is an exclusive presentation of Project Entertainment Network.
Thank you for coming to the Project Entertainment Network store. Please place your order. A good choice. A t-shirt for the horror show with Brian Keene. A Manta Method coffee mug. There's more. A Necrocast Icon hoodie. That's sharp. But why on earth would you want Bizonged leggings? Wait. Are you Mr. Frank? The Project Entertainment Network store, stacked with goodies from all your favorite podcasts. T-shirts, hoodies, mugs and more. www.projectentertainmentnetwork.com.
There shall come a podcast like no other. Defenders Dialogue with Brian Keene and Christopher Golden. Marvel Comics' original superhero non-team convenes once again. The Incredible Hulk, the Savage Submariner, the Master of the Mystic Arts, Doctor Strange, and a dynamic supporting cast of Marvel superheroes battle against evil as the Defenders. Without further ado, true believers, here's your hosts, Brian Keene and Christopher Golden. Excelsior!
And welcome back once again, true believers, to Defenders Dialogue. I'm Brian Keene.
And I am Christopher Golden. And Brian. Excelsior, true believers, and Excelsior, my friend.
Excelsior to you as well, my friend. What a monumental occasion today.
It's a bittersweet day, and I'm trying right now as we talk, and I should have done this before. I'm scanning back through text messages. I don't think I'm going to be able to find it, but I'd love to find the text message where I texted you and said, "Hey, you know what we should do?" And you said, "Let's do it."
You know what? Obviously, this show is, you can listen to it on iTunes and Spotify and Stitcher and iHeartRadio, but you can also listen to it on YouTube. And what I do every week, if you go to the Brian Keene YouTube page, when I put up episodes of Defenders Dialogue, I take panels and artwork that from that episode, and I put them up as we're talking about them, so you can sort of read along as well. Not enough to violate anyone's copyright, just enough for fair use. But maybe what I'll do is I'll go through my texts and see if I can find that original text from you, and I'll put it up right here in the video.
Yeah, that'd be great, because I'm looking right now while you're speaking, and I think I'm close here. I got I got back to 35. Oh, okay. Let's see. I'm getting close. Live action, folks. Well, look, while I'm doing this, Brian, while Chris is doing that, let me tell you what we're doing today, folks. We're at the end of the original Defenders run. Today we'll be covering issues 151 and 152. So what was started back in the day by Roy Thomas, Peter Gillis brings to a close. In that time, we fought the Headmen and Nebulon, the Celestial Man, and the Elf with a Gun, and the Sons of the Serpent, and the Overmind, and the Secret Empire, and all kinds of other weird villains. One of those villains will make a return today, as well as a new Defenders villain who quickly became a fan favorite, Manslaughter. So did you find it? I'm almost there, but I'm
almost
listening and going along with you.
All right.
I have to say that it's really interesting to me that Manslaughter became a fan favorite because, I liked him in his previous appearance, and he's interesting to me here, but I don't know. I'll say this. I really liked the first 2/3 of Gillis's run more than I recall having liked them the first time that I read them.
Right.
And that's saying something because I always liked Gillis. I always thought he was a very talented writer. As he wraps it up, as we said in the last episode, I'm not like the biggest fan. However, I feel like I want to give Gillis the benefit of the doubt on these last couple of issues because there's no way of knowing what other powers were at work here. It certainly seemed like he was going to this place, but it feels like he had to wrap shit up quickly.
I think based on the strength of the writing in the first half of his run, I think absolutely there was editorial interference here at the end. Everything is rushed, as you said. There's the obligatory Secret Wars 2 crossover, which we're going to have to get into this issue or this episode. I mean, I think he had ideas for a big sprawling saga that could have probably run another 10 or maybe even 15 issues. And I think he found out the writing was on the wall and the series was going to be canceled, and he had to wrap everything up. Two things that we should talk about while you're still looking, because they do impact the end of the Defenders.
Okay.
First of all, at the time, all across Marvel Comics, there was a crossover called Secret Wars 2. Now, this is back in the 80s. These days, crossovers happen every season. Spring, summer, winter, fall, Marvel has some kind of crossover going on. Back then, these were all still relatively new. Marvel had Secret Wars, and DC had something called Crisis on Infinite Earths, and they were the first two really big crossovers. Marvel followed up the success of Secret Wars with Secret Wars 2, which is like following up the original Star Wars with Plan 9 from Outer Space. In a nutshell, Secret Wars involves he's not a villain, he's not a hero. He's a godlike being called the Beyonder. And basically he has the powers of God. And in the first Secret Wars, he remains that sort of being until he's defeated by Doctor Doom, of all people.
Right.
But then for Secret Wars 2, Beyonder comes to Earth. So
Which
that he can
you love Secret Wars 2.
No, I loathe Secret Wars 2. As far as rebuilding my comic collection goes, I stop with Secret Wars 2. As far as I'm concerned, that's when the Marvel Universe was destroyed. The heroes
and a
lost.
parallel reality began.
Yeah, exactly. So Secret Wars 2 is my stopping point for my back issues. But and oddly enough, Defenders ends with a Secret Wars 2 crossover. The other thing that was going on in Marvel at the time, Jean Grey, a.k.a. Marvel Girl, a.k.a. Phoenix of X-Men fame. She had been dead for a long time in Marvel continuity, and they finally brought her back in the pages.
She had been replaced by a clone.
Yes.
Named Madeline Pryor.
That's right. But they brought the original back in the pages of Fantastic Four and the Avengers, and that would lead into a brand new book called X Factor, which would also feature some of our Defenders, Beast, Angel, and Iceman, who were all, of course, members of the X-Men before they were ever champions or defenders.
Right. So, of course, they needed those in order to do X Factor, and bringing back Jean Grey was a big part of that. X Factor would be the 5 original X-Men. They had to have these characters who happened at this point to make up the core of the Defenders.
Right.
So I'm sure there was a conversation about whether we should, whether we should do a new Defenders title that had new characters, or whether we should just wrap it up. But I'm sure they looked at the sales and said, no, let's just wrap it up.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I remember having a conversation with Jim Shooter years ago at a convention. And, I asked him about that. I said, when I was a teenager, I said, I remember the Defenders ending, and that was like the first big series that ended. And I was like, damn, what am I going to read every month? And it wasn't so much sales driven. Yes, sales were down from, J.M. DeMatteis's run.
Right.
They certainly weren't reaching DeMatteis levels, but it was still a strong seller. So I suspect a lot more of it had to do with the X Factor launch. And they just, they decided, well, sales are a little down, and we're going to launch X Factor, so let's do this.
Yeah,
but
the Beyonder was Secret Wars 2 was handy as a mechanism, as a Deus Ex Machina, literally to use here.
Right. So did you find text?
I did. I found the original tweet, or text, I should say, and I think you had commented on something either on Twitter or Facebook regarding the Defenders and our mutual love of that of the characters in that era. And I'm still angry because you have the Son of Satan T-shirt that I want. And it's from August 19th, 2017. And I said, your comment just now reminded me of something I was thinking of doing last night, which inspired me to think of something else. So I don't know what my original thought was. You and I should do a reread of the entire run of the Defenders. And at the time I said 10 issues at a time, and then do 30-minute Skype calls about each 10 issues or so. We'll record them as podcasts, but really it'd just be for fun. And you said, I think that's a fantastic idea, and the Masterworks would be the way to go. And, we sort of did a little housekeeping about, what the collections are and the order that we'd want to read them. And you said, let's start with Marvel Feature 1 through 3. And then you came up with the title Defenders Dialogue, based, of course, on the letters page. Yeah.
Yep.
And I said, obviously, we could talk about the TV thing, too. This is when Defenders was going to be on Netflix. I said, but really, it's a great excuse to talk about the comics and our love of comics at that age and why we still love that series. The early stuff will be fun, but it'll be a total fucking blast when we get the really crazy shit. And then and then we went. I'm just looking to see if it was.
That's exactly what we did, isn't it?
Exactly, it is exactly what we did. Except I kept arguing that we shouldn't we'll be able to do more than 2 or 3 issues in an episode, and you were like, no, we don't. And you were right, Brian. I will hand it to you. There's no way we could have covered 10 episodes in an hour, never mind half an hour, 10 issues, I should say.
Although I got to tell you, these last 2 issues we could probably sum up in half an hour.
Yes. Well, let's launch into them. And then we'll discuss what comes after.
Absolutely.
New Defenders 151, I will say, starts off with a bang with a beautiful cover from Kevin Nolan, which spoils the return of Manslaughter right on the cover. And shows Manslaughter having killed or incapacitated all of the Defenders. And it's a great cover. And
right.
The presence of Andromeda on this cover and reading these 2 issues reminds me to say, I don't know why I had such affection for this character. Rereading this run, I thought, well, we'll get more of her as we go, but we don't really get any more of her. She's just kind of there.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Gillis never got a chance to really flesh her out more. And it wasn't until Cullen Bunn took a run on Defenders in the modern era that she really got fleshed out.
Yep. And Cullen did a great job on that series.
He did.
There's also, I should say, the creative team for these last 2 issues changes slightly. It's still Peter B. Gillis on script and Don Perlin on pencils. But the inker on these 2 issues is Del Barris.
Right.
And, again, it's really inconsistent. I mean, there are pages that I think look fantastic with Del Barris on the inks, and then there are pages where they look very rushed to me. But overall, I'm content with the inks on there. I think they're good.
I agree. And we open with a gorgeous splash page, and it's inked very well. And we see the interloper. Last time we saw him, he was in somewhere between Russia and Asia. He's now walking across the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to me here, Brian, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I could be misremembering, even though it was only a couple of weeks ago. But, and I think we're going to sum up some of the big plot points of these 2 issues in conversation rather than in breaking it down. But
exactly.
Didn't the Dragon of the Moon get ejected from Moondragon?
She did, or it did. It was ejected from Moondragon.
And somehow Gillis has forgotten that? Is that what's going on here?
I don't know that Gillis has forgotten it. I think, again, I don't blame Gillis for this. I think it's just very rushed storytelling.
No, listen, I've said many times, I always admired Peter Gillis as a writer. I'm a really big fan. And so any of the things that we may be complaining about these issues doesn't undermine my affection for Gillis's writing. I mean,
I don't think it's that Gillis forgot. I think it's that the dragon fooled everybody, and there just weren't enough issues to really develop that.
Okay. Because the way we
I,
left her, Moondragon, I thought it was just the sort of evil part of her. The good and evil were battling within her somehow, but that was all her, not the remnant of the dragon. And now it does seem like the Dragon of the Moon is still somehow within her. In any case, the established thing is that the Interloper and the Dragon of the Moon are ancient enemies going back thousands of years. And Brian, you know what this reminded me of?
what's that?
For those of you who are comics fans primarily and not fans of horror fiction, you may not get this, but Brian, it reminds me so much of F. Paul Wilson's The Keep.
Oh, absolutely.
In
Yes,
the way
absolutely.
that these are sort of ancient enemies, and the new rise of this ancient enemy in the Dragon of the Moon has summoned this ancient sort of anti-hero character who's going to show up and do final battle.
Right. Yeah, very, very much akin to that.
And if you've seen the movie version of The Keep, folks, that's nothing like what we're talking about. The book is completely different as far as the backstory, and you should check it out.
Exactly. So yeah, the Interloper is walking across the ocean, and he comes upon a ship in a thunderstorm, and turns out Moondragon is also on that ship, and the Interloper knows that she is still possessed by the Dragon of the Moon, and he decides he's going to follow it to shore.
And by the way, we should point out to people, and I'm sure that you'll include, he's walking across the ocean,
Right.
on top of the sea, in a very Christ-like fashion. Although, again, I refer back to Odin. He reminds me very much of classic interpretations of Odin. We cut to where are we, Brian? Oh, in the airport.
The airport in San Francisco, where the defenders are bidding farewell to Seraph.
Yes, a very polite farewell considering the history between them, but they've forgiven her because she was so kind to Cloud. And there's a conversation going on. By the way, the tongue-in-cheek title of this issue is Second-Degree Manslaughter, because, of course, manslaughter returns. But there's an interesting conversation about Bobby Drake and his affection for Cloud, and discovering that Cloud was actually a nebula. And the interesting thing, I love this conversational moment between Seraph and Gargoyle. Seraph says, or I should say, Gargoyle says, well, all I hope is that you don't get in trouble with your government for not bringing back Cloud as you were told. And the editor's note in the caption box below says, if you missed the last 2 issues, forget it. It's way too complicated to explain here.
And that's very true. Very true.
So I think in light of that, we will do the same. Let's move on.
Yeah. So the defenders get home, and Candy appears via video screen and tells them she has a surprise for them. They walk into their living room, and there's a giant welcome home cake. And Candy jumps out of it in a quote unquote costume.
Which is sort of like, it's sort of like something that would have been worn in German cabaret. It's like a French maid with long gloves thing that happens to also have a cape.
I thought DC Comics Zatanna with Devil Slayer's cape is what it looks like.
Okay, there's something to be said for that. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Candy kisses Warren, as she should, but apparently she electrocutes him. And Warren falls over unconscious, and it turns out it's not Candy at all. It's really manslaughter.
It's really manslaughter hiding inside a hologram. We're just not going to spend too much time, on that. But basically, manslaughter has returned, and in the process of doing so, he's knocked out Angel. The other defenders are facing him. And manslaughter says, listen, don't get riled up, even though I just attacked one of your members. Because I'm a fucking lunatic. And manslaughter basically says, I was really impressed by the style of the defenders, and I want to be a member. Manslaughter's here to join up, folks.
That's right. And we could basically sum up pages and pages of, Manslaughter takes on the defenders one by one, trying to prove his worth to the team.
Yeah, it's really, then we get into Bobby Drake goes into a room and in search of Candy Southern and finds her tied with all four limbs spread eagle on the bed in the costume that Manslaughter had been wearing earlier, or that the hologram had on earlier, in a sort of Gerald's Game fashion. It's a little weird.
It is.
But he frees her. Other members of the team are running around. I also love this the conversation that has had Brian about Andromeda's special senses because she's Atlantean, about her undersea, quote unquote, undersea tracking senses, which is yet another example of like, hey, we need to invent some kind of power for one of the characters to use that will be useful in this scene. The problem is those powers that are invented for this scene don't turn out to actually be useful.
No. So yeah, the fight continues.
Brian Keene and his undersea tracking senses.
Yeah. There's a scene with bugs crawling out of a chicken bucket. It's a return to weirdness for the team until Manslaughter makes the mistake of hitting Valkyrie over the head with a sword.
Yeah, and this is the moment of the book.
Yeah. Some really fine artwork here by Perlin, where we see Valkyrie, chooser of the slain, not Barbara Norris Valkyrie, not the Valkyrie we've come to know and love. This is a true Asgardian, and she grabs Manslaughter by the throat and she says, "Mortal, look into the eyes of a chooser of the slain," and she's choking him to death, and the other defenders, they have to pull him off. And, Manslaughter pleads his case. He says, "I'm sorry, I grew up on the streets and, I never realized until now, if I'd only seen what was in Valkyrie's eyes, I'd have never set fire to the rest of your mansion."
And then, Brian, your favorite moment in the issue.
This is the moment of the book. The elf with a gun appears on Manslaughter's shoulders.
Sadly, he's only a hologram, but he does appear sitting on Manslaughter's shoulders with a gun.
That's right.
And then the laser defense system, which I didn't know they had, in Defenders headquarters, renders all of the defenders temporarily blind. The place is on fire. They have to go back and save Angel. Manslaughter somehow has gotten himself a flame-resistant fire suit.
He plans ahead.
He for a guy who's out of his fucking mind, he does seem to plan ahead.
And then, when all seems lost, the interloper arrives at Defender's mansion, and apparently he knows Manslaughter. We don't know how yet, but he recognizes Manslaughter, and then he intimates that he's going to need the Defenders, and he can't let their place burn down. So he smashes all the windows with his eyes. And this is the part that I don't understand. He says, "Let the wind run with the fire until the fire becomes only wind itself." Now, Chris, I have some experience with fire.
Yes, folks, Brian Keene does have some experience with fire. Brian Keene thought he was Johnny Storm and learned to his chagrin that he was indeed not.
That's right. It has been my experience, particularly when I nearly burned myself to death, that wind fans the fire.
Yeah, I mean, this has got to be a magic power thing. Because normally, if something inside is on fire and you break a window, that's actually going to have the opposite effect. It's going to make the fire rage much higher rather than snuff it out.
Right.
But the interloper has interloper powers.
And he tells them, I am the interloper. And, I apologize for Manslaughter's mischief, but you have to let him join you. And Valkyrie's like, bullshit. And he says, well, you have to because you know, doom is upon us all. Behold, it comes. And suddenly there's an eclipse, but it's not really an eclipse, is it, Chris?
It is not. It is the arrival of Moondragon and the Dragon of the Moon. And Moondragon says, "Hello, defenders, my friends. Your comrade Moondragon is here, and it is time for you to die." You know what's weird? Most
What's
times when a character says it is time for you to die, those characters who are being thus threatened do not die. But in Defenders 152, the final issue of the series, we're going to find that some of the Defenders do meet their fate, Brian.
Yes, they do.
At least as long
For the-
as comic
For the
books
Bronze
allow.
Age. They
Yes.
meet their fate for the Bronze Age.
They do. So same creative team, another great opening splash page, and it's called "The End of All Songs" is the title of this issue.
That's right. And we open with Moondragon facing off against, for the last time, Chris, Iceman, Beast, Valkyrie, Andromeda, Candy Southern, Gargoyle, and Manslaughter.
You know, what's interesting, too, is that Candy Southern, even though Manslaughter put her in this costume, and she has no powers except her intellect, it gives Candy the opportunity to be in costume as a defender for the first and last time.
Agreed.
At least the last time until now.
We then get Moondragon airing her grievances with each of the defenders. I thought all this had been solved and put away, but it turns out she's still mad about things. She's mad that the Beast never trusted her, and that Valkyrie listened to Odin, and that Gargoyle looked into her soul and called her evil. That Manslaughter raped her mind. That's the character's words, not mine. But then she realizes that there's one other person with the defenders, and that is the interloper. And at that moment, the dragon manifests itself. It's no longer Moondragon. It's the dragon.
Yeah, and Interloper and the Dragon of the Moon are sort of up against one another. And the Interloper says, let's see here. "I am always coming in where I am not expected," thus his name, the Interloper. "But our battle is not 1,000 years gone. It is only 1,000 years old, and it has grown strong roots and long branches since then." I liked all of this quite a bit.
Yeah.
I like this sense of, again, this reminds me of so much of the fiction that I enjoy, the sort of history between them. I just wish that it had been established more and better. In any case, the battle breaks out. Moondragon, and look, let's face it here. On an ordinary day, by the way, somehow Angel has his sight back. On an ordinary day, Moondragon and the Dragon of the Moon would wipe the floor with the defenders in about 30 seconds. However, they have the Interloper with them to sort of distract the Dragon of the Moon, to fight them. But even so, there needs to be some way to turn the tide here. And the Interloper figures a way to use the Gargoyle to that end. And then we realize why. The Interloper here reminds me of the Red Lady, the Red Witch from Game of Thrones, or Bran the Broken, in the sense of, now we know why Manslaughter is here. He's here because he's fucking crazy.
That's right. He has Gargoyle uses his mystical blast to pour demon energy into Moondragon. And then he has Manslaughter. Remember, from their previous encounter in Defenders 134, Manslaughter has a mind link with Moondragon. And he uses that link to basically infect Moondragon with Manslaughter's madness, and drives the dragon, trying to, basically it's an exorcism of sorts, trying to drive the dragon out of her body.
With insanity.
Yeah.
And this is the thing that I was like, so Moondragon is completely insane and poisoned with her own evil and madness and the evil of the Dragon of the Moon. So the way to fix that is to make her even crazier. But apparently, at least temporarily, it seems to work. Then we see, thanks to the Dragon of the Moon, apparently Moondragon manifests a bunch of powers we didn't know she had.
Yeah, shape changing, and she's a harpy like Medusa at one point, and she's a fire being like the Human Torch or myself at one point.
And Moondragon, and here's the thing that I think by today's standards wouldn't be in this book, which is that when they're restraining the harpy version of Moondragon, trying to get Manslaughter's insanity out of her mind, Manslaughter basically goes up and non-consensually kisses her, which is the thing that makes her scream the loudest, and all of the power and insanity is sort of blasted out of her.
Right.
I'm not explaining that well, but I'm not 100% sure how that happened or why that was the trigger.
Right. And then what happens is Moondragon and the dragon itself both disappear in a whirlwind of lightning and energy, leaving the defenders behind.
And the interloper and Manslaughter, sort of in the aftermath. And then the interloper decides it's time to tell the story of how he and Manslaughter came to be associated.
Right. It turns out that Manslaughter is the only person in many centuries to have actually tracked down the interloper. And the interloper was so impressed, he showed him how to use his telepathic abilities. I think the Beast sums it up. So you foisted a telepathic psychotic hitman on the world? Thanks a lot.
Well, and then the interloper starts to tell his history of battling the Dragon of the Moon. Apparently, the interloper was buddies with a king of Prydain who was called Artus Dux Bellorum, who is also known to us these days as King Arthur.
That's right.
And at King Arthur's side, the interloper fought the Dragon of the Moon.
That's right. Now, Hank, having the benefits of a classical education, says, wait a minute, that you fought the dragon with King Arthur, but the dragon was the core of the moon of Titan, which is populated by the Eternals. So you have to be an Eternal as well. And the interloper doesn't really give a good answer to this. Basically, they use it as a one-panel plug for the Eternals series, which was being published at the time. So we never really do find out his origin.
Right. And by the way, this is a sort of tangent for a minute. Those of you who follow the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it's interesting to go back and see what is related to the Eternals, which is one of the big Marvel movies that is coming. And I'm really curious to see, Brian, what they plan to do, because I think it's going to open entire new vistas for the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
I do as well. Not to get off on a tangent, but the original, Jack Kirby's original Eternals series is just like the Defenders. It's one of my favorites of the Bronze Age. And we've seen stuff from it already in the cinematic universe. The Celestials and Titan and stuff like that. So I'll be curious to see how they bring it in full force.
Yeah. Yeah, very interesting. Well, then we get back to a scene that, I was sort of frustrated because it's an echo of stuff we've seen before. It is a couple pages of Heather Douglas, a.k.a. Moondragon, struggling with the diminished Dragon of the Moon, sort of whispering in her ear, saying, I will take care of everything. Just let me in. Take my power. So basically, to sort of begin this whole thing all over again. However, in the midst of this, with her massive telepathic power and psychic ability, and Brian, I'm going to let you do this, because I know you want to. Moondragon senses the presence of some great power that is the Deus Ex Machina of this story. And what happens then, my friend?
Well, that's the Beyonder from Secret Wars 2 that we talked about at the beginning of the show, and this is a crossover, so they have to find a way to obligatorily have him show up. So he shows up. Remember, this is basically a being with the powers of God. The Infinity Gauntlet is nothing but a trinket to this entity. So,
Right.
of course, he's
Except
manifested.
a god that is a god that is much dumber than he thinks he is.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the Beyonder just is pretty stupid for an all powerful being. But go ahead.
Yeah. He comes to Earth in Secret Wars 2 to learn what it means to be human, and he manifests in a disco suit. This is 1985, folks. Disco was already dead by then. he hears Moondragon's plea, and he says, "What do you wish, my child? Do you wish to become my disciple?" And she says, "I just want to do good, to make things right and clean and good, everything in order and harmony." And he says, "Give me your hand." And he holds out his palm, and there's the dragon of the moon in his palm,
diminished to the size of an earthworm.
Right. And he asks her, he says, "This is a ring of darkness. It's something you've worn for a long time. Do you want it back?" And she says, "Not unless it pleases you, my lord. Throw it away if you want to." And he says, "The thought did cross my mind, but you should have some token by which you are known as mine. The ring will do as well as anything." So he fashions the dragon of the moon into an actual physical ring.
And puts it on her wedding finger, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. Puts it on her finger. And then Moondragon and the Dragon of the Moon are, definitively one person. And she's full of evil power. She can do whatever she wants, whatever her desire.
But is that how you read it, though, dude? Because this is where I have a problem with this story. So I feel like the thing with the ring and the Beyonder is just kind of shoved into a story that was already planned.
Right.
Because it doesn't affect the story really at all, except in these few pages.
Right.
And also, basically, Moondragon is now good. She just wants to do good, and everything leads you to think like that's fine. She's going to do good things. And then as soon as he leaves, he says, "Go and use it as you intended." And then she's evil again. I can do all the good I want. I can cleanse the world of all the evil I see. I can do it. And the best thing I can do now is kill the defenders.
Right.
I just, anyway.
I read that as her and the dragon are now one.
Okay.
She's no longer possessed. They are actually the same entity.
Yeah, but when she's saying, when he's got the ring, sorry about that, folks. She's got the ring, and the Beyonder puts that ring on her finger. She knows that it's made up of the Dragon of the Moon. It's just weird. Right. It's just weird. But anyway, carry on.
So we then get a one-panel interlude where the Fantastic Four are trying to reach the Defenders because they have news. That's an allusion to X Factor, which we talked about at the beginning of the show.
Right.
And we then transition back to the destroyed remains of, Defenders Mansion. And it's sort of the aftermath. And Moondragon comes stumbling in. She says, "Help me, Defenders. I broke free of the dragon, but it's after me again. You've got to stop it." And, they don't know if they should trust her or not. But then Isaac, good old Isaac, he picks her up. He helps her. And what does he get for his troubles, Chris?
Well, for his troubles, Moondragon shoves her fist into his chest and rips out the soul of Isaac Christians, leaving only the body of the gargoyle, which then mutates into a much more horrific demonic gargoyle being version of the one that we've seen. And this one actually contains the Dragon of the Moon, according to what Moondragon says here.
Right. Now, I want to stop you there and go off on a rant.
Please do.
It's 1985. I was 17 reading this. This is, in fact, the last time we see the Isaac Christians that we've talked about on the show. Now, yes, next week we will talk about J.M. DeMatteis's Gargoyle miniseries, 4-issue miniseries.
Yes.
That takes place before this.
Yep.
Spoiler alert, Isaac eventually returns in the modern era, but he's brought back as nothing more than a butler to Damon Hellstrom and Patsy Walker.
Right.
And he's never really been used as anything more than that since.
Yeah, he was recently seen also just as one character in an array of characters in a lineup at the end of the Bendis Defenders, which was but inspired by the TV series that had Luke Cage and Iron Fist and Jessica Jones. A bunch of Defenders are at the very end of that series. Are glimpsed there, and that's great to know that the old Isaac, who is destroyed at this point, does eventually return and is currently existing in the Marvel universe.
Right, but he's never given any agency, though. It's just, oh yeah, and there's that weird old guy, the gargoyle,
Right.
So it's fairly well, Isaac Christians, fairly well.
Yeah. Yep. It's a sad moment. Wipe away your tears, folks, as we do the same, because it is a bummer, and we have very little hope in the rest of this issue.
No.
Basically, the interloper throws what he calls his fear cloak, which is this fur cloak that he wears over the gargoyle, and then, unfortunately, Valkyrie and Andromeda have to base over Gargoyle and Moondragon, I should say.
Right.
And Valkyrie and Andromeda just start stabbing them as much as possible. It just gets a little crazy here.
It does. And then Candy disappears in a flash of light, and then the mansion comes crumbling down. All in like the space of three panels.
Yeah. And then we have this moment that reminds me of Arcade's Murder World. It reminds me of multiple comics from the slightly earlier than this era where you'd split up the characters. And in fact, Gillis has done this once already in these last 2 issues. But essentially we get Angel, Beast, and Iceman, each with their own personal challenge. Angel needing to save Candy, Beast needing to save Chris, the guy who's trapped inside
pilot.
That frozen thing, Chris Larmuth,
right?
Who has that weird John Carpenter's The Thing-esque infection.
Right, back in issue 141.
Right, and Iceman, who is given the opportunity to save the twin brother and sister, I believe they are, who are Cloud, or who were the people Cloud based their identities on.
Right. If you missed last week's episode, folks, forget about it. It's too much to go over here.
So Moondragon basically says you get to choose. You can face me, fight me, or you can refrain from the battle and save these people.
And I think Bobby sums it up well. This is a great moment for Iceman. Moondragon says, "What do you say?" And Bobby says, "I'll say that you're an utter monster, and I'll freeze you until your organs crack like glass. You don't deserve to live." Finally, someone on this team is making... I've been saying this since they introduced Moondragon as a character.
It would not surprise me if we see her in upcoming Marvel Cinematic Universe films, but we shall see. So basically, then we end up, the 3, Angel, Iceman, and Beast, go through a portal. And now, with the Defenders are rejoined into the battle with Andromeda, Interloper, Manslaughter, and Valkyrie against Moondragon, the Gargoyle, and the Dragon of the Moon. And again, there's a lot of talking until the Interloper says that's enough, attack. It's I don't know. It's
Long story short,
yeah.
Andromeda finally gets her chance to shine. Unfortunately, it leads to the death of Isaac Christian's gargoyle body, which is now inhabited by the dragon. She kills it. And remember, Isaac's soul is no longer inside of it at that point. But it's a pretty cool moment for Andromeda. But Moondragon bests both Andromeda and Manslaughter, and
right.
Then
well, Valkyrie's trying to slash the Dragon of the Moon, and the interloper grabs her and basically says he's going to pour this additional power into the runes etched in her sword to give her the force to actually kill the Dragon of the Moon. What Valkyrie recognizes immediately is that this is the life force of the interloper that he's pouring into her and into her sword, but it needs to happen. And he says, if you see another way, tell me, but otherwise we've got to do this. And Valkyrie says, as the ever the rational thinker, it will be done. Today let there be an end to this. Let the power of life flow out of us, meaning both of them, to deal death to the evil one. But it's not enough, Brian. And the interloper,
no, it's not.
It's
not.
Yeah. The interloper reaches out to Manslaughter. Go ahead.
Yeah, Manslaughter and Andromeda join the chain. And that's enough. That's enough psychic energy or whatever it is. And they unleash it on Moondragon and the Dragon of the Moon. And this giant cosmic whirlwind of energy appears. And, the Beast and Iceman and Angel are outside, and they're like, they're committing suicide in there. And the three of them decide that they're going to go save their friends.
Well,
Chris
Valkyrie
and
yells to them.
Yeah.
The way is clear. Go back to them. They are dying, and you must save them. These people,
right.
These three defenders who are left behind. Your defenders, protectors of the innocent. If our name is ever to mean anything, you must go now.
Right. So Warren saves Candy. The Beast saves Chris. Iceman saves the twins. And when they come back through the portal, we reach the end of the world's greatest non-team.
Yes. They come back through the portal, and those remaining characters, Manslaughter, the Interloper, Valkyrie, Andromeda, Moondragon, and the now transformed Gargoyle, Angel says, have all been carbonized. They've all been turned to ashes, and they're basically statues at this point until Angel touches Moondragon and she begins to crumble.
Right.
So they sacrifice their lives, but we see the people that were saved. And we find out from the twins who were Cloud based their identities on that someone called Heather Douglas spoke into their minds and said, I was given this power to do good from beyond, and I couldn't. All I could do was force you to do it, goad you into casting us into the abyss. Perhaps that was the Beyonder's purpose all along. And then she said, this is in turn my last gift. Their lives, remember me, meaning the lives of these people that they saved. Remember that there was some good amid the evil at last. And then only Moondragon's statue crumbles. The others remain standing.
Right.
We have one quick little glimmer of hope there at the end, Brian.
Yeah, as a quick little denouement, there's a yip, 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 and out of the ruins comes Sassafras.
And then we have a full-page ad, classified, top secret, not to be released until October, X Factor #1.
Yep.
To cross-reference Avengers 263 and Fantastic Four 286. I think an admirable effort on the part of Peter Gillis to wrap this series up, with a pretty epic story.
Agreed.
I just wish that it had been, in a weird way, I feel like it should have just wrapped up like this when Moondragon first turned evil.
Agreed.
Because it was, it feels like we got to the end of that Moondragon story, and probably this was intended to come. This is my presumption. This may have been intended to come a little bit down the road.
Like around issue 175,
right.
A good anniversary, double-sized.
Right, exactly. And then, but it was a handy way to wrap things up. It just feels like it came really fast after the last time they fought the Dragon of the Moon and Moon Dragon, which is just very similar. There's a lot of repetition between those two stories.
Right. But that brings us, Chris, 67 episodes, the end of the Defenders, but not the end of Defenders Dialogue.
Correct.
Yeah. Now, as we said, next week we will be covering J.M. DeMatteis's Gargoyle miniseries. For you continuity buffs, that takes place right around the start of Peter Gillis's run.
Right.
And then after that, Chris, I know you're really excited. What are we doing after Gargoyle?
Well, after Gargoyle, before we get to it, I think we're going to do the 5-issue Defenders Indefensible.
That's right. I forgot about that. Yeah, by J.M. DeMatteis and Keith Giffen. Now, we're breaking our own rule. Our rule here is, we only focus on the Bronze Age stuff we read as kids. But Indefensible is so goddamn good. And, Giffen and DeMatteis, both legends on the Defenders, we thought it would be fun for an episode to see what they did with the team in the modern era of comics. But after that,
I'm so excited because you have never read The Champions.
Never.
And The Champions is, in essence, the most similar to the classic Defenders in the sense that their characters, it's a group of characters who have no reason to be in a comic book series together at all, even less so than the original Defenders, because the lineup is Black Widow, Hercules, Angel, Iceman, and Ghost Rider. It's a very weird, eclectic group. The series didn't last very long, a couple of years. It has some amazing work for a long period. It's best known for the work of John Byrne.
Now, as you said, I did not read Champions as a kid because my newsstand never carried it. And this was back in the 70s before we had comic book stores. But do I recall correctly from reading other Marvel comics, does Red Guardian join the team at some point? Isn't there
I can't remember. It's been years since I read it.
I seem to recall referenced in another Marvel comic that a Russian superhero joins the team about halfway through the book, and I was wondering if that was Red Guardian. So I guess we'll find out together.
Yeah, we will find out together. That is probably true. It's a really weird fucking series, and again, like, I think about the Champions, and the first thing that comes into my mind is an issue where they fight Plant Man. That I really enjoyed, and I know that that probably doesn't help, but I really love that issue.
The Defenders fought Plant Man during Steve Gerber's run. He was one of the emissaries of evil, so I'm down for that.
Yeah. I mean, it's very, it's a very interesting, So we'll get there. The original writer, it looks like, was, let's see, and again, we'll see familiar faces. David Anthony Kraft was one of the writers of the Defenders. Tony Isabella was one of the people who developed it. We'll learn more as we go. And I hope, and I want to say to anybody reading this or listening to this show, by the way, it's a short series, and it's a crazy series, and I think that you should read along. That's all I'm going to say.
I agree. Champions is available in one collected volume, so you can get it cheap, trade paperback or hardcover. So yeah, and I'm sure it's on Marvel Unlimited as well.
Yep.
So, all right.
Oh yeah.
Well,
Dark Star was the Russian character that you're talking about.
Okay.
Dark Star was in, and one of the villains that I really liked, and we'll get to it, is the Swarm, which is a character who's made up of bees.
Oh yeah, the Swarm. I know from Ghost Rider's solo series.
Yeah, but done really well in the Champions, I must say. So Excellent. We'll see as we go.
Excellent. All right. Well, folks, if you enjoyed Defenders Dialogue, as you heard, the best is yet to come. But you know what else is good, Chris? The other podcasts that we do. You, of course, are on Three Guys with Beards, and I am on The Horror Show with Brian Keene. And both of those are available wherever you listen to Defenders Dialogue. And they're all made possible by the Project Entertainment Network. If you go to projectentertainmentnetwork.com, you can see all of the 25 shows on the network, and you can get yourself some cool Defenders Dialogue swag.
Absolutely. And I need to order one of those T-shirts, Brian.
I have one of those T-shirts.
I need to order one. And next time we're together, we need to have a picture taken of the two of us in our Defenders Dialogue T-shirts.
I think that's a great idea.
All right, my friend. Well, you know what I say, and I say it especially loudly today after completing 67 episodes of Defenders Dialogue and coming to the conclusion of the Defenders Excelsior, True Believers.
Excelsior to you, my friend. We'll see you here next week, folks, in true Stan Lee fashion, as an all-new era of greatness begins.
Because no one demanded it.
You're listening to American Top 40. More tragedy in the news today. Kim Kardashian has a new baby. What the hell? There's nothing good to listen to. Hey, wait, what's this?
Anything moist. You gotta roll that out.
See, it makes me do weird things. I don't like it.
God damn it. I'd be going down on myself? Shit.
Hey guys, it's Bill,
Mick,
Maya.
and Junior.
from the Unsupervised Podcast.
Check us out every Thursday on the Project Entertainment Network.
Take a break from the stress of the world and come have a laugh with or at us.
Bill.
My Favorite Story, a podcast author anthology featuring short fiction from the hosts of the Project Entertainment Network shows Three Guys with Beards, Jim Moore, Jonathan Maybarry, and Chris Golden,
Tom Clark from Necrocast Igbon,
Brian Keene of The Horror Show, Chuck Buda, and Armand Rosamilia of The Mando Method, Mary San Giovanni of Cosmic Shenanigans, Jay Wilburn from Matters of Faith, John Urban Sick of Ink Stains,
Bizung's Mr. Frank.
Available on Kindle and in paperback and through the Project Entertainment Network store.
www.projectentertainmentnetwork.com.
This has been an exclusive presentation of the Project Entertainment Network.